In this section, we will be looking at the needs and characteristics of living things. So we'll be looking at what scientists consider living and non-living and what those things need to survive. The first thing that living things need to survive is water. Without water, we would not be able to live on this earth. We already discussed how important water is. So we are actually made up of at least 60% water, and without water, we would not be able to survive after 3 days because we would be going into dehydration. Water helps break down the food in our body. It also helps us grow. It helps move certain substances around in our body. It helps transportation with cells and reproduction. And without water, we would not be able to reproduce. Your first key word is all. The second thing that living things need is food. It provides organisms with energy for all of our life functions. There are two types of organisms. The first one is called an autotroph, and those are producers. So those are plants and some bacteria. They actually use sunlight to make their own food, or own energy. And then we have heterotrophs, or consumers. That would be us, or animals, plants. They're going to eat plants. They are going to be able to consume food for energy. So there's three types of consumers or heterotrophs. So there's carnivores, they eat animals. There's herbivores, they eat plants. And then there's omnivores, they eat plants and animals. All living things need space to live, so that would be called our habitat. That's where they find shelter, and that's where they can get their food and water to live. And they are going to be able to compete for this space to live in their environment. Your second keyword is living. The next thing living things need is homeostasis. So homeostasis is the ability to maintain a stable condition. So for example, in our body, we need to be able to have a certain temperature in order to survive. If our temperature gets too hot or too cold, we would actually die. And we also need to control the amount of water in our body in order to survive. And it maintains our cells' functions in our body through transport and keeping that balance. So homeostasis means to maintain stable conditions or to balance in your body. All living things are made of cells. So there are unicellular organisms. They are simple cells, so there's just one cell. And then there's also multicellular organisms like us. We have a lot of cells and are more complex in our body. So if you look at this picture here, this would be one single cell, and then this one up here would be a bunch of cells, multicellular all together. Your third keyword is things. Another thing about living things is that we all share similar chemicals. So all organisms have DNA, and that would be this picture over here, this DNA structure. So we all have DNA, and it's made up of nucleic acids inside. We all have proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, which are for our energy. All living things take in and use energy. So that's how our organs work, and that's how our cells get replaced, and through cell division, that's how plants make their own food. So we all need energy to survive and to do our daily activities. Your fourth keyword is need. Next, living things need a sense and response. So we need to be able to respond to our environment that we live in. So for instance, if somebody does something to you, you're going to respond back to them. If somebody touches you and you're not sure what it was, you're automatically going to be like, oh, what was that? So your body is being stimulated to that response, especially plants also. So if the sun is facing like a flower one way and then the sun is going to turn, the flower is going to then respond and turn towards the sunlight. So we all have our own way of responding to things around us. Growth and development. So all organisms are going to be able to grow larger by multiplying their cell number. So we all start out as one tiny little cell, and then we are going to multiply and grow. So for example, right here, this was a tadpole, and then it's going to develop into a frog at the top by growing its number of cells. So it grows and develops over time. All right, next is reproduction. So all living things need to be able to reproduce and pass on their DNA to their offspring. So there are two types of reproduction, sexually, so that's with a mother and a father, and there's also asexually with one parent, and then you make the exact copy of yourself. Your fifth keyword is water. All right, moving on to what is ecology and an ecosystem. So ecology is the study of how living things are going to interact with each other in their environment, and that's everything that is made with cells. So an ecosystem is made up of living and non-living things in the environment that's all around us. So living things are called biotic factors. So everything that is circled over here in green is going to be a biotic factor, like a tree, a butterfly, a plant. So anything that is living is biotic. Anything that is abiotic is non-living. So that would be the clouds, or the water, or the sun. So everything with a red X over it would be abiotic. Please do this on your own paper so you remember what abiotic and biotic means. So now we're going to talk about the levels of organization in our universe. So first, we are all made up of cells, and there's also unicellular and multicellular organisms in our environment. So organisms are organized into levels by how they interact with one another. And over here is going to be the level of organization for ecology. So we start off by having atoms, and then atoms are combined into molecules, and then we make organelles, which are inside cells. Cells are the basic unit of life. And then we move into tissues, organs, organ systems, organisms, populations, communities, ecosystems, biosphere, and the universe. So it goes from smallest to largest. Now on your paper, it's going to show you how to go through the levels of organization for a frog. So right here you are being shown that this is the smallest part of a frog, the cell. And then right here you're going to draw a bunch of cells made together That would be a tissue. And then those tissues are combined they are made into an organ. So in this example, it is a heart. And then the organ system is made into all the organs in the frog. So the digestive system, the cardiovascular system with the heart, the nervous system. So all of those together form an organ system. And then lastly would be the organism itself as a whole, which would be the whole frog. So it goes from the smallest to the largest in the organization of the system. Your sixth keyword is food. So an organism is the smallest single living thing in your body, in the world, okay? So we have the organism, which has food, water, and shelter, and it needs habitat, and it needs to reproduce. It's also going to have its niche, or its niche. Everybody says it differently. So that's a way an organism's total way of life goes. For example, it would be a frog. That would be a single organism. When you have a bunch of organisms, that would be a population. So that would be a bunch of frogs that are the same species. They are able to reproduce with each other and interbreed, and they're able to pass their DNA down into their offspring. So for example, all of the frogs living in the pond in your neighborhood would be the population of frogs in that specific area. It's not the population of the whole world, it's just for that specific area you're getting the population for those frogs. Community is next. So that is all the populations in an ecosystem. So for example, all the frogs, all the insects, all the birds, all the mushrooms, all the bacteria. So all of those populations in a specific community, an ecosystem. Your seventh keyword is space. The next one up would be ecosystem or biome. So this includes all the biotic living and non-living abiotic features in the environment. So for example, these would be rainforest, desert, tundra, deciduous forest, taiga, and marine, etc. And then the largest would be the biosphere. So that is every place on Earth that can support life. There is the atmosphere, which is the air. There's the hydrosphere, which is the water. And there's the lithosphere, which is the land. So the biosphere is the overall place where life can be supported. Your eighth keyword is homeostasis. So now we're going to quickly go through all the biomes briefly. I would look over this on your own time more, but this is just going to be a brief overview of all the biomes because there are so many. I don't want to take too long, but we're going to go through all of them quickly. So the first one would be a desert. So that's very, very dry. It can be cold or hot. It has a lot of sandy soil. They're found all over the world. Mostly rodents, birds, and cacti are there. Your ninth keyword is and. The next biome is a savanna. So it is very dry, found in Africa, Australia. There's lions, elephants, zebras, hyenas, and it's very open grassland with very few trees. Then we have a prairie or temperate grassland. So we have the dry, cold climate like savanna found in North America, Russia, South Africa. Typical animals there are bison, elk, hawks, coyotes, and it's very open grassland with a very few trees, clover, a lot of sunflowers, so very pretty. The next biome is the Arctic tundra. So it's a very cold and desert-like area. They have something called permafrost. That is permanently frozen soil, and this is located in the North Pole or the South Pole. Very cold-like animals, so you have Arctic foxes, polar bears, falcons, some salmon, trout, and then a lot of shrubs, grasses, and mosses. Then we have the alpine tundra, so very cold mountains, very little trees, and frozen landscape as well. Mountain goats, sheep, bobcats, and we also have short shrubs, trees, and grasses there. Your 10th keyword is many. Not sure if I skipped a keyword, but we'll see. Next biome is taiga, or coniferous forest. So it's the most abundant biome on the earth. So it's the most common biome. It's very cold. It has a lot of snowfall. It's kind of like Alaska, Canada. A lot of beavers, wolves, moose, bears, and typical forest with a lot of trees, pine trees, and fir and spruce. Tropical rainforest is probably one of the most important biomes in our world. So it's very warm there, it's humid, it's right near the equator, so the center of the earth, a lot of rain. It is the most diverse biome with plants and animals, so it has the most amount of diversity out of all the biomes. It needs a lot of trees for shelter and food for the bats, monkeys, frogs, jaguars, parrots. It has a very dense, tall tree-like area. They're called canopies. So that does not allow a lot of sunlight to get to the ground. It doesn't allow a lot of plants to grow there. It grows for like adapted trees, palms, and mosses. Temperate deciduous forest, that is us. So we are North America. It's moderate rainfall, very humid, less than a rainforest, however. It has coyotes, birds, deer, squirrels, so the typical animals that we see around us. And there are trees, flowers, and yep, you know how we usually are. Your 11th keyword is other. So now moving into the water biomes. So we have freshwater biomes first. So no salt, usually less than 1% of salt in the water. Organisms live in freshwater and they can't stand living in salty water areas. So the first freshwater biomes are going to be rivers and streams. So water is going to move continuously in one direction, and they are constantly changing throughout the world because they're always moving. There's fish in there, birds, salmon, and other organisms. Plants such as algae usually grow on the rocks or some kind of moss. Your 12th keyword is things. Next, lakes and ponds are freshwater, so that's a standing body of water that does not move. Some streams and rivers are going to empty into it. Phytoplankton, very, very small organisms such as phytoplankton, and then small fish, turtles, ducks, snakes, so anything like that. Plants such as Elodea, which is a type of plant that will swim around, and floating bacteria, and such as lilies and stuff like that. Wetlands and swamps and marshes and bogs. So these are areas where the water is, the land is very saturated with water, and it's going to just stand still there all the time. They have the highest species of diversity in all ecosystems, like amphibians, reptiles, ducks, alligators, and a lot of pond lilies, cattails, and a lot of spruce trees. Your 13th keyword is to. T-O. Next are the marine biomes. So this is salt water. So that's about 3/4 of our Earth. And then marine algae supply about 90% of the world's oxygen. You have the estuary. So this is where freshwater streams and rivers meet the oceans. So they're always going to drain into somewhere. So the oceans, this is where they meet. It increases diversity and productivity. Oysters, clams, crabs, they live there. Algae. Then we have the beach, or the intertidal zone. So this is where the ocean meets the land. It creates waves and tides. Animals and plants are always changing since it's moving all the time. Crabs, worms, crawfish, and mud and sand are constantly moving. Then you have the coral reef, which is very, very important. It includes very shallow waters that receive a lot of sunlight, usually near the beach or intertidal zone. Includes barriers, edges of the continent, such as the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. It has a little coral, zooplankton, clams, algae, and seaweed. And our last slide here is the deep ocean and benthic zone. So this is all the waters of the ocean that are deep or open water. So that is the sand and dead organisms in the ocean. The deeper you go, the less sunlight you have. So in this picture here, you see it gets very deep after it gets off of the continental shelf. So that's the benthic zone of the ocean. Typically large animals like whales, dolphins. There's also small animals, plankton, sponges, sea stars, and then you also have your seaweed and certain plants. There are no plants in the very deep area of the ocean because there's no sunlight there, so they would not be able to survive. All right, last key word is survive. And we made it. All right, make sure you fill in your paper notes and look over the biomes some more because we briefly went through each of them, and look over the levels of organization of your organisms. And that's it.